A man shot and killed by Glendale police, but he wasn't the person officers were searching for.
We took you to that scene last night as breaking news, but tonight we're learning new and concerning details from Peoria police who have taken over this investigation.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Southern Draw Law. My name is James White, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former police officer. So imagine that you served your country and you had some PTSD issues and you spent a substantial portion of your time after service just trying to figure it out. You run into some trouble and you end up in prison and you get out. And 9 days later, when you get out of prison and you're thinking about reconnecting with your family and thinking about reconnecting with your kids, you get shot and killed by a police officer over something that you literally had nothing to do with. That's what happened to Dillon Siebeck. So it's Glendale, Arizona. The Glendale, Arizona Police Department gets a call from a female who states that she and her boyfriend were involved in a domestic violence incident and he ends up pointing a gun at her. So the police respond to the scene where the domestic took place, and by that time, the suspect from that domestic has gone. He's not there anymore. The suspect is a 24-year-old Hispanic man, small in stature. The police comb the area and they find what they believe to be the suspect vehicle parked near a local park. And so they approach the vehicle and notice that the windows are darkly tinted, so they aren't able to see inside from the sides. Now, adjacent to the area where the person parked the car is a park, and under a gazebo is 46-year-old Dillon Siebeck, a white male who looks nothing like and could probably not be mistaken for the person that they're looking for. However, doing what they do, they begin giving Mr. Siebeck verbal commands to put his hands up, and based on his inability to comply, probably because he had no clue what was going on or why the cops were yelling and pointing guns at him, he makes a furtive movement that results in him getting shot and killed as a result of a very reckless way to conduct an investigation by the Glendale Police Department. Well, let's talk about it. So what do you have to have before you can control somebody's movements or give them a lawful order? There's case law on this. It's called Terry versus Ohio. You have to have reasonable articulable suspicion connecting this person that you're dealing with to criminal activity. Reasonable articulable suspicion allows you to do an investigatory detention. It allows you to investigate. It does not allow you to pat people down unless you have information that they're armed and dangerous. That's a Terry stop. Just like we talked about in our last video where a 17-year-old was shot and nearly killed by Texas State Police over a furtive movement that I'm sure we're going to find out was complete garbage. So Terry versus Ohio gave the police a standard by which they are supposed to operate. They can't seem to do it. They don't seem to understand that they need to be able to have a certain amount of information about the person they're dealing with before they can start barking orders at people and shoot them when they don't comply. In the event that this was the person that they were supposed to be dealing with, they still wouldn't have a right to shoot him simply because he reached towards his waist. If this was the actual person they were supposed to be dealing with, they at least would have some information from the caller saying, yes, he's armed and dangerous, he just pointed a gun at me. So that at least would make some sense as to how you could get to a place where you're like, oh, this guy's got a gun. But nothing. Not to mention the fact that they later found the person who the call was actually about leaned back in the driver's seat of the car that they believed was the suspect vehicle. So nobody thought to look in the front windshield. I mean, you don't have to stand directly in front of it, but you have to do some critical thinking at some point in your law enforcement career. Okay, we think the guy might be over here at a gazebo. Maybe before we approach him, let's go over and take a look at the front of this vehicle to see whether anybody's in there, to see whether he reacts. Maybe he gets up and leaves if he's the suspect. Maybe he takes off running if he's the suspect. Nothing. We get over, we can't see in the windows. We immediately divert our eyes to the person who's standing 100 feet away and decide that's the guy. Nothing else. No body cam yet. I'm sure they'll hold on to it as if their lives depended on it. But again, this guy's not connected in any way. So no force authorized in any way whatsoever. He's not connected in any way to this crime. Then on top of it, it takes them 2 days to communicate with the family, even though the family says they've been calling back and forth over the last 2 days trying to figure out what's going on with their loved one. So they sat on this for 2 days. They didn't communicate with the family. They made notification to the family 2 days later, probably because this news story is getting ready to drop, right? That's what it's all about. It's the transparency thing that they do is always just police are reactionary. And because they're reactionary, they don't understand what it means to just be straightforward and honest about something. They always have to do something that is reactionary to the news coming out or the community uprising or the body cam dropping. It's like, guys, you were notified that somebody got shot. You probably should be letting out some information. You probably should have a critical incident briefing. You notice how anytime they think that there's a good shoot, like where the person actually shot at a police officer, or a police officer was shot and killed, or a police officer had to shoot somebody who it was very clear that that person had a gun or a knife, there's a critical incident. Do you think it's a coincidence that they only do critical incident briefings when they believe they're justified and they are completely locked down any other time? In fact, you can almost predict that they were wrong and that they did not act in conformity with the laws or their training simply based on what they do with the information and how you have to go about getting it. The transparency thing is a lie. It's a complete lie. They're only transparent when it suits them, when it benefits them. They are never transparent when they are the least bit concerned that maybe they screwed up. Then you have to fight tooth and nail to get any information out of it. So let's take a look at some of the Arizona homicide statutes to figure out what, if anything, applies, although I don't have a lot of confidence based on what I know so far that anybody's going to be charged. They should be charged, but, then again, Arizona is where Phoenix is, and who knows? Who knows what's going on in Arizona law enforcement these days? So let's pull up the Arizona homicide statutes and take a look at what applies here. We don't even have to do a use of force analysis because there's no use of force authorized when a person was completely disconnected from anything that was going on.
Okay, so when we pull up the Arizona Revised Statutes, Title 13, we have definitions. So the first definition is going to be premeditation. That means that the defendant acts with either the intention or the knowledge that he will kill another human being when such intention or knowledge precedes the killing by any length of time to permit reflection. Proof of actual reflection is not required, but an act is not done with premeditation if it is the instant effect of a sudden quarrel or heat of passion. So pretty much premeditation is ruled out here. So that's going to rule out first-degree murder, because if we look at the first-degree murder statute, you're going to have intending or knowing that the person's conduct will cause the death with premeditation. And so that's going to rule that out. So when we go to second-degree murder, so a person commits second-degree murder if without premeditation. Under subsection 3 here, you have under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to human life, the person recklessly engages in conduct that creates a grave risk of death and thereby causes the death of another person. That probably could stick because you do have, in my estimation, a recklessness mental state here. Because again, recklessness in most states is when a person disregards a risk that he either knows or should know, where the conduct in question, i.e., pointing your gun at a person, giving them an order that is not lawful because you have no right to detain them, and then pull the trigger when they don't do what you tell them to do, it's pretty easy to understand how, if this is the wrong person and you didn't do any sort of investigation leading up to that point in order to verify that it is the right person or that this person is involved in any way, that is a willful disregard of a risk that you should know that the person won't know what's going on, won't comply, and you'll end up killing them without justification. So in my mind, I think I could make the argument as a prosecutor that the police officer here engaged in reckless conduct created circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to human life because he didn't even take the time to try to figure this out. He just pointed a gun, started barking orders, and then when the person didn't do what he told him to do, he shot him. So the person recklessly engaged in conduct that created a grave risk of death and thereby caused the death of another person. It's pretty obvious to me that that's what we have here. But a lesser included offense to that might be manslaughter. And so under the manslaughter code, you've got Title 13, 1103, a person commits manslaughter by doing any of the following. So you have recklessly causing the death of another, which, again, you could get a recklessness theory, but the jury may not see it as the police officer creating circumstances that show a grave indifference to human life. Indifference means you don't care. So it may be a steep hill to climb to suggest that the police officer was just like, nah, I don't care. That would be sort of like if you just shot into an open area or something, and it's like, well, I don't really care what happens here. So it could be a stretch for second-degree murder, but, the jury could see that this was so egregious and so poorly investigated that they could find him guilty of second-degree murder, assuming he's charged at all, which, again, I don't have a lot of confidence in, but that's where we are. But I say, if I had to guess, this is probably going to land in the realm of manslaughter, simply because manslaughter gives you the widest sort of reach, and you can easily see how, recklessly causing the death of another or committing second-degree murder on a sudden quarrel or heat of passion resulting from adequate provocation by the victim. Adequate provocation is where the jury says, we believe that what the victim did in this case gave adequate provocation for the police officer to do what he did. But the fact that they were there is as a result of a recklessness by the police officer for not doing a proper investigation. And then you even have negligent homicide. So you have negligent homicide, that's Title 13, 1102, a person commits negligent homicide if with criminal negligence the person causes the death of another person. So you could have a situation where the jury just sees it as negligence, which means that, negligence again is you had a duty to conduct yourself a certain way. That would be duty. What you should have done is A, B, C, or D. Instead, you did E, F, G, H. And so that was a breach of duty. So you got breach, you got duty, you got breach, and then causation would be, but for you breaching your duty, this person would not be dead, and the consequences were foreseeable, that based on the circumstances. So that would be both direct and proximate cause. And then damages is, causation is the link between the breach of duty and the end result, which is damages, and so the damages is death. So it's possible that this case could land anywhere between negligent homicide all the way up to second-degree murder, depending on all the facts that come out and how the jury ends up seeing it.
In closing, this is going to be one of those things where the body cam is going to tell the whole story. Somebody got trigger happy. We teach these guys to be scared of their freaking shadow. We teach them that they can do anything they want in the name of officer safety, and we've militarized them to such an extent that they shoot first and ask questions later. There's actually more accountability for people defending our country overseas in rules of engagement and use of force and that kind of thing in the United States military than there is on the streets of the United States of America when it comes to law enforcement. We have militarized these guys so much that they get all the military equipment and they don't get any of the restraint training that comes along with it. And we don't hold them accountable in any way. The only hope is when videos and news stories go viral and everybody gets up in arms and makes a squeal about it. And then sometimes things happen. But most of the time, it's an injustice. It remains an injustice. They'll be like, well, what would you do? Well, I don't know. I don't know what I would do, but I would like to think that I wouldn't shoot somebody before I figured out whether they were connected to the crime. Anyway, that's all for this one, guys. I just wanted to put it on your radar. Once the body cam comes out, we'll walk through it, go over it step by step, and see what, if anything, there was that would have given these police officers a justification to conduct themselves the way they did. But sadly, you've got a 46-year-old man who was trying to get a new lease on life who's dead tonight because of the fact that police officers are trigger happy and they have no discipline and they're taught to be afraid of everything. I want to thank you guys for going over to the Southern Draw Law Court Cam channel. If you haven't done so, run over and subscribe for me if you don't mind. It doesn't cost you anything. It'll help me a lot when I start posting content, which will be sometime in the next couple of weeks. If you want to support the Southern Draw Law channel monetarily, I don't offer any type of memberships, but I will leave my Venmo and PayPal link both here on the screen as well as in the description. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Check out some of the other videos on the channel and leave a comment on there as well. Until I see you again, take care, always film your interactions with the police, and keep your evidence to yourself.